Okay. Hi, thank you for coming to the Institute for Leadership and Actions Self-Awareness and Emotional Intelligence workshop. I hope you appreciate our title slide. My name is Natalie DeSandro. I am a social work major here at Rutgers. I'm a senior and I'm graduating in May.
Hi, my name's Amanda. I am a double major in political science and urban sustainability and agriculture. I am also graduating in May. And Alex Ifland is a double major in political science, or no, social work and policy. I'm reading my own slide. And he's also a co-facilitator, but he could not join us today.
So the objectives for today are to provide an overview of self-awareness and emotional intelligence. So do a little defining, a little bit of discussion around these concepts. We want to discuss how they can aid in everyday life and some situations that they may help with. We want to practice these skills in an activity, and we want to connect self-awareness and emotional intelligence to the practice of leadership. So let's do a little bit of defining of self-awareness. So self-awareness involves monitoring your stress, thoughts, emotions, and beliefs. So this type of monitoring can happen in the moment or later on, like thinking back on a situation and thinking about how it made you feel, what your stress level was, what kind of emotions were you feeling, and what kind of thoughts were running through your head. So this can happen like after the fact or during it. So if you're in an argument with somebody, kind of like monitoring, like, am I feeling really stressed? Am I getting really angry? Like what's going on with me? So it's all about having a greater understanding of things that we may not normally take a second to think about, and kind of taking that step back and thinking like, okay, what's really going on? Why am I feeling this way? So it's not only monitoring those thoughts, but kind of going deeper and thinking like, what's causing me to feel this way? So it's really all about having a greater understanding of yourself. You want to, another part of self-awareness is knowing when to take a step back and knowing when to push yourself a little bit harder. So we're all students and we all know that sometimes it's just too much. We've said yes to too many things. We've taken, like some people taken like 9 classes, so to be able to know when is it a little too much? When do I need to take a step back? Or when can I keep going? When can I push myself a little bit harder? Right. So I think since we're all students, that's a great example of like, okay, where can I work harder and where am I doing too much? Am I getting overwhelmed? Right. So that's part of that awareness of yourself and that understanding of yourself and your emotions. So just to kind of connect those two first little points, if you're monitoring your stress, for example, and you are feeling stressed 24/7, you can't sleep, you're always thinking about school, work, whatever it may be, that would be a good time to like think about perhaps taking a step back because you were monitoring how you're feeling. You're able to know when to take a step back. So the last little tidbit of self-awareness that we're going to cover is identifying your own strengths and weaknesses. So this is definitely easier said than done. I know for me, it might be easier for me to talk about my strengths and a little bit harder to talk about my weaknesses. So it's just like hard sometimes to identify where you may be lacking, but using the first two things that we talked about, like monitoring your stress, thoughts, emotions, and beliefs, can help you see where your weaknesses lie and where your strengths lie. And that's a really big part of being self-aware. And that way you can further play on your strengths and you can work on your weaknesses. So you can cultivate self-awareness by doing activities such as mindfulness exercise. So mindfulness exercises. Or mindful exercise, actually, that works too. Doing exercise mindfully can help you be more self-aware. But what I really meant by mindfulness exercises is, things like meditation, yoga, but it doesn't necessarily have to be, some like those are like the first things that come to mind, of course, because those are kind of what's like talked about and shown the most. But whatever you're doing whatever works for you, that you're able to be in that moment and fully present, that's you doing a mindfulness exercise. So if you're going for a walk outside, right, and you're really like, looking at everything, breathing in the air, feeling good, I would consider that a mindfulness exercise, right? Because you're being present in the moment, and that can help you kind of turn your attention inward and be more self-aware from that. Journaling would be an example of kind of like that later on reflective activity where you're maybe each night you're thinking back on the day and kind of like journaling and writing out your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs about what had happened that day. And some things may come up that you may not have expected, or like you may not have known that you were feeling that way, because journaling can tend to bring out some stuff from our subconscious. So that's definitely a great way to be more aware, and it's a very deliberate way, I feel. And lastly, setting intentions can help you be more self-aware. So if you like have identified intentions for like what you want to do, and even like writing them down, so it can kind of like play into journaling too. Writing them down can be helpful, but that way you're holding yourself accountable, right? Like, this is what I want to do, and I'm aware this is what I want to do, being self-aware, and kind of like taking the steps that you need to get to those intentions or goals that you set. You're being self-aware in the process. So setting intentions in and of itself is a way to cultivate self-awareness, but then what you do to get there also, it's like a process, and you're being self-aware throughout that whole process. So that's a little definition of self-awareness. So now we can move on to emotional intelligence. So I just want to add that Daniel Goleman is the person to go to if you ever want to learn more about emotional intelligence. He has tons of books that he has written about emotional intelligence. So I got the factors of emotional intelligence from his work. So a couple of things about emotional intelligence, and a couple of things that it exemplifies. So you're able to motivate yourself to persist in the face of frustration. So when things get hard, right, as they do, you are able to look within yourself. So this is where it definitely plays into self-awareness, and they're so connected. But you're able to see how you're feeling and what's going wrong, and how you can respond to the situation and have yourself keep going. So even when things are hard, you're able to find that motivation within yourself, right? Because sometimes motivation is not going to come from outside sources, and you need to be able to, conjure it up within yourself to be able to continue on, even in the face of whatever frustration or setback you may be facing. So another factor of emotional intelligence is controlling impulse and delaying gratification. So I know that in today's world, we have a lot of like instant gratification, right? Like, I want this, so I'm going to buy it, and I'm going to get it today or tomorrow, whatever Amazon today, like I'm going to get it now, there's like no, like, it's just so easy, right? So I think that having a lot of emotional intelligence, you're able to kind of take a step back from that and like really think about what you're doing. And like buying something on Amazon is just one example, right? There's tons of different ways we do this in everyday life, but to be able to control those impulses and kind of think like, okay, how could this pay off more for me in the long run, right? Like delaying that instant gratification that we've definitely become accustomed to, that's a factor of emotional intelligence. So you're kind of like keeping your cool, like within yourself, I would say. And that goes into the next factor, which is regulating your mood and keep distress from swamping the ability to think. So regulating your mood I kind of interpret that as regulating the way that you respond to different scenarios. So kind of like how self-awareness is about regulating or monitoring your thoughts and beliefs. I think of that as regulating your mood is kind of similar to that, because you're seeing like a situation and you can change the way that you react or how you feel about a certain thing, and you can kind of like do different things to bring yourself down, well, calm yourself down, not bring yourself down, but and help with whatever situation may be really like plaguing your mind. So, swamping your ability to think, as Daniel Goleman said. But, sometimes we really get in our heads and we can't seem to focus on the task at hand. So kind of being able to calm yourself down, to be mindful, and to focus on whatever task may be at hand. I know yesterday I used the example of a test, which we're also all familiar with. So if we get really in our heads and we're anxious and stressed and nervous before a test, we definitely will not be able to perform our best because we're thinking about a million other things, right? So being able to regulate your mood, calm yourself down is definitely a big part of emotional intelligence. And lastly, do you have a question?
Did you hear, I don't know if it's just a thing on TikTok, but I did hear this thing where your brain with like anxiety and excitedness, like they're kind of like from the same thing. So if you're ever nervous or something, they say just tell yourself out loud that you're excited for it, and it's supposed to like help rewire you a little bit to like get less anxious. I don't know if that's real, but
I like that. Well,
That's an interesting thing, because that is true with the brain, but I wonder if that, I'm going to try that next time I get
even
nervous.
if it just sounds stupid to say like, oh, I'm excited to do this speech, I'm excited, like it just kind of helps you change your mindset a little bit right before.
I feel like a lot of the things that we get really anxious about tend to be like big things that could go really well, right? Like, so if we're thinking like a speech, for example, if we're thinking like, I'm excited, because you could be excited for that because it could bring you really good things in the future. So I do think that's something like worth being excited for and probably worth trying. Yes, it is kind of like intention setting. You're like setting the intention, like this is going to be good and I'm excited to do it. And you probably would do better on whatever it is that you have in mind too. That's cool. I like that. I'll probably have to try that too. The next time I'm trying to think. It's supposed to snow. I always talk about driving in bad conditions in any of these workshops, I feel like, but that's like my like big anxiety. And it's supposed to snow tomorrow and I have to drive. So maybe I'll be like,
Yeah, like excited to like, journey through the ice.
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm excited to go like slipping and sliding like on the highway. It'll be fun.
Worst that happens, it's a little roller coaster.
Yeah. No, but that's definitely interesting. Thank you. But the last factor is to empathize and to hope. So a big part of emotional intelligence is your relationship with other people and being able to decipher when people are upset, when they're angry, when they're sad. That's a big part of it, is to be able to read other people. And by reading them, it's easier to empathize with them in whatever situation they may be facing. And lastly, to hope. So to think a little bit in the future and be excited and hopeful for what's coming is also part of emotional intelligence. So I also want to touch on Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences. There are about 12 of these now, and they range from like a variety of topics to like movement, nature, or natural intelligence, which is like nature, musical intelligence. But the two that we really want to focus on are intrapersonal and interpersonal. So intrapersonal intelligence is basically self-awareness. It's all about knowing yourself really deeply, understanding your motivations for things or your reactions to things, and kind of like what makes yourself tick. So this is to me, this is very important, because if you can know how you're going to react or how you're going to feel if this happens or this happens, it can help you kind of like prepare for that, or even maybe do some work in journaling or in your meditation to work on tweaking those reactions if they're unhealthy. And then the second intelligence is interpersonal intelligence, which is understanding how other people work. So what motivates other people, how to work with other people. So this, like, I wouldn't say that you have to know somebody like super deeply to be able to know how they work and how to work with them. Like, it doesn't have to be your best friend to be able to use this intelligence. But I think just like putting in some effort to get to know whoever may be on your team or in doing a project with you, whatever it may be, kind of like putting in the effort to understand them can help you have a better relationship for the duration of whatever the project is, and probably help you be more productive in it as well. So that's emotional intelligence. So here's quickly, I'm going to go over some reasons that these skills are important and why we should work on developing them. So as I mentioned, emotional intelligence specifically enhances your empathy. So if you're able to better understand people, you may view them differently than you would without that same level of empathy, and you're definitely going to be more able to work better with them because you understand them better and you can empathize with whatever situation it is or they're going through. It's definitely going to enhance your communication skills. Same kind of idea, like if you know how somebody works, if you're using that interpersonal intelligence, you're going to be able to communicate with them better and more. It's just going to be more productive, I would say. You're going to be able to compromise better with people because if you understand where they're coming from and they understand where you're coming from, it's just going to be easier to like reach an agreement that both parties are happy with because there's this level of mutual understanding and empathy. And lastly, you're definitely going to be more patient. If it was somebody who maybe in the past you got quickly, like you lost your temper, or it was just easy to kind of get annoyed, I think that having that, first of all, knowing yourself is going to be important, but then also using your emotional intelligence to know that other person better is going to help you be less impatient and probably have more patience with them so that you're able to, just because you understand them better. Whenever you understand someone better, I feel like you're going to be more patient with them and more understanding with them. So it helps to avoid misunderstandings, miscommunications, hurt feelings, and missed opportunities. So this is like a little exercise that we won't go into, but it definitely does fit well into this self-awareness, especially the self-awareness piece. So values are things that we hold dear, right, in our lives and kind of things that stay with us, but they can change over time with new information or situations that come up. But I think that knowing your core values is definitely a big part of being both aware and emotionally intelligent, because you're able to identify these are the things that are important to me and this is what I hold dear, right? So these are just 7 quick steps. You want to start with a beginner's mind. So try not to go into it being like, I know my values, these are what they are, I'm gonna just write them down and I'll be done, because you can like explore and find that new things may be important to you that maybe you never put thought into or work into. So then create a list of your personal values. So a way that you can do that list is separating or thinking about like peak experiences in your life, suppressed values, so things that you may not really know that you value, but you've kind of been like pushing them down. And you can probably discover some of those with some meditation practices, and your own personal code of conduct. So like, how do I operate in my space, in my world? You want to sort these values into related groups. You want to highlight the central theme of each value group, maybe give it like a title or a name. You want to determine your top personal core values. So seeing like in each group, maybe like choose one, like this is a really important value to me personally, and I use this value to operate in my life. You want to give your personal values a richer context. So maybe through research or, talking to different people, you can like understand more about this value and how you can use this value in your life. And lastly, you want to test the ecology of each value. What's an example? So an example of a value group, I think, would be like if I had like honesty, integrity, and like trustworthiness, like all written down, I feel like they could like go in a group, right? That would be like, okay, these things all are like related to each other, and these are all values that are important to me. So I'm going to put these in a group and title it some other synonym for those words. But that would be like a group. And then if you kind of are like seeing when you're writing them down, like things that clearly like fit together. I think they would go in a group. So that's how I think of a value group. Okay, so this will be the end of my voice for a little bit, but I just want to talk about how these concepts can be connected to leadership and the practice of leadership. So awareness of personal leadership skills is integral in improving transformational leadership potential. So being aware of, and this comes back to your strengths and weaknesses, right? So being aware of where you soar as a leader and where you have room for improvement can help you to work on those improvements and work on those, things that you may have a little bit of a shortcoming. And I think that a good way to, if you're having trouble thinking about or conceptualizing where are my strengths and weaknesses in this way, you can ask people that are close to you, right? And who know, because usually those people, if they're close to you, will not falter. Will tell you like, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses. But it's just, we don't usually ask stuff like that. So that information isn't usually just like given without a prompt, right? So I think that if you're having trouble with that, asking the people who are close to you, they can help you identify those areas, and you can become more aware of them. And that's how you can become a better and more self-aware leader. Mindful awareness can aid in better understanding the needs of others. So quick definition of mindful awareness: it is a temporary state of non-judgmental, non-reactive, present-centered attention and awareness. So if someone comes to you with a problem, whatever it may be, if you're able to bring that mindful awareness to the situation and to what they're telling you, you're going to be able to understand their needs better and how you can serve their needs in a better way, just because you were really like listening. You weren't on your phone and you weren't like thinking about your grocery list or whatever it may be. You were really like in that moment, and being in that moment was super important because you were able now to understand them better. So it's all about understanding. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to talk to us a little bit about how we can use these skills in action.
Sure. So thank you, Natalie, for turning it over to me. So for self-awareness and emotional intelligence in action, we broke it down into 3 major components, but this is something that can absolutely go into several different parts of life. So it's collaborative skills, networking, and transformational leadership. I always mispronounce transformational for some reason. So for collaborative skills, this can go into our interpersonal relationships. It can be something that you can see in a group project, in your family dynamic, in your friendships. Having that self-awareness of who you are in that space and how either you can contribute or elevate others in it can be critical, especially in group projects. Again, all 4 of us are students, so we know how important that is to be self-aware in that kind of space. Networking, again, I think Rutgers does a really good job of explaining to us why networking is so important. This is something that can be both in your professional life or your personal life. So having like the networking skills to just know what you can contribute to that person's life or to that company's life and what they can give to you as well can be really, really critical in that. And also having an emotional intelligence to understand who you're talking to and who you're working with. It can kind of help to flow conversations better and get your point across in a better way. And so for transformational leadership, this is something that just to quickly define it, it's as a leader, you can have a lot of impact on the community that you're within. So for a transformational leader, you're allowing either to elevate or to enhance the community that you're within by altering things that you work with the community to understand what their needs are. So you're not just coming in and saying, this is what I think we should do, and we're going to do that. You're going in as a leader to congregate, well, maybe congregate over Zoom because COVID now, so we can't congregate, but to have a conversation and a working relationship to understand what the needs are, how we can meet them together, and how we can move forward together. So having that self-awareness to know what you can bring to the table is important, but then also the emotional intelligence to look at others to see what they need, because odds are the perspective that you carry is going to be very different than the perspective others have. And so having that working communication can be huge in being a leader. A leader is not just about self, it's about all, and also self, but mostly you're taking a position to lead others. And so it's really critical to have emotional intelligence in that position. Next slide, please. I love this meme. This gets, I don't know why, it gets me every time. It's just so great. So what does it look like to practice self-awareness? I'm so glad you asked. So if we can go to the next slide. So this is a little exercise we're going to be doing today. I've been certified in mindfulness meditation for a few years. It's something that I still practice because everybody has their own different way of doing mindfulness meditation. My training kind of started with you meditate for an hour and you see where you come out at the end, but it's kind of transformed from that to, oh, you can do this for an hour, you can do this for 10 minutes, 5 minutes, or even just 1 minute if you really need to learn how to center yourself. So the focus of something like this is to center your breathing. I called this circular breathing last night. It is not, it's called square breathing. I get my shapes confused. I'm a human being. So it's basically you hold your steady breath, you inhale through your nose to the count of 4, hold for a beat, and then you exhale to the count of 5. And the whole purpose of this exercise is to focus on your breathing and to just physically check in with different parts of your body all the way up to your mind. And so just to kind of check base with where we are today, do you want more of an explanation of how this works, or do we actually want to sit down and take a deep breath together and see where this goes? I want to make sure that where are we this morning? Or afternoon, I guess now, huh? Where are we this afternoon?
Are you asking me?
Hey, whoever. There's 4 of us here, you know?
Let's do the exercise.
Okay, cool. Perfect. So I'm going to apologize in advance. I have a very whiny golden retriever who, whenever I'm talking to my computer, he wants to chime in. So if you hear Leonardo da Vinci, he's fine. He'll be fine.
Love the name. Wonderful.
He's a diva. But so before we get started, if you're more comfortable turning your camera off during this, I completely understand. I want you to get comfortable in how you're sitting. So it doesn't have to make sense. It could be with your legs behind your head. It could be just sitting cross-legged in your chair, but just get comfortable in a position where you don't feel like you have to hold your body up consciously. If it's easier, put your feet directly on the ground or in your lap, just in a way that separates from your body so we can identify it. Okay. And if you'll please just close your eyes. And we're going to practice that square breathing. So you're going to take a big, deep breath in through your nose and hold, and then push out through your mouth. And one more time in and hold and out. And at the pace that you're most comfortable with, continue just inhaling through the nose, push out with your mouth. And as we do this, become aware of your feet on the ground or in your lap. Become aware of your toes, your ankles, reach to the knees, and with the next breath out, all the way to your thighs. And to the hips. And as we breathe, let any idea pass right through your mind. There's nowhere to be, nothing you must do, but sit and breathe. And from your hips, go to your waist. Feel your ribs hold your lungs as you fill them with air and exhale out. From your ribs up to your shoulders, let them drop. Nothing must hold you. From your shoulders to your elbows, with a big deep breath in and out. All the way down to the tips of your fingers. And with the next deep breath in, release your jaw. Release your tongue from the top of your mouth and relax your face. There's nowhere you need to go. There's nothing you need to do. Just breathe. And now from the top of your head, feel your neck, feel your shoulders. Become aware of how they sit. Become aware of your wrist and your hands. Become aware of your ribs once again, being filled with the air and released. Follow your spine back down to your waist, to your hips. Follow to your knees, all the way back down to your ankles and to your toes. And when you're ready, just give them a little stretch. Wake yourself up. Come back down to earth when you're set and when you're ready to rejoin us. And so this is an exercise that with the square breathing, you could keep that for as long as you need to, or you could even just do a few batches of the inhaling and the exhaling if you just need to center yourself in the moment. And so I think something, and I did forget to say this, and so please forgive me at the beginning, it's okay to have, when you're trying to clear your head, little weird thoughts come in, like, oh my God, where did I put the toaster away? Or like, oh my God, like, have I watered that one plant that I got 3 months ago that I forgot I had? And like, you can really just let them in and just push right out. And so that is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's really great to practice just clearing your head, to really just touch base with where you are emotionally and just cleanse what space you're in. I find this is really helpful when there's like a conflict or when you're super stressed out or just kind of finding that you're getting really overwhelmed. Again, we're all students. A lot of us work. So just to really give yourself that grace and that dignity to just be within yourself and to honor yourself is super important moving forward. So before we go to the next slide, does anyone have any questions about the square breathing or just the meditation in general? Perfect. Natalie and Michael have seen me do this probably 20 times this semester, so I give them a hall pass. So there's something very important with this as well. Our co-facilitator Alex and my sister Laura always remind me that meditation is not for everybody. They're both like busy people. Their brains just don't shut off. They're always thinking, doing something. So sitting still is like the bane of their existence. So there's a ton of other things you can do to center yourself in this way other than yoga and stretching or meditation. Journaling is huge. Natalie was talking about that earlier. Sometimes actually just writing down what you're feeling, it can or anything at all, just words, just silliness, it can really get out that emotion and tell you where you are, because your subconscious knows where you are, but you might not. So by journaling, by writing down, it allows you to really look at and review how it is you're feeling, your intentions. This is also identifying identifying self-care activities that work best for you. So knowing that there's intersectionality with things like self-care and what works best to just to have a productive, and maybe even not a productive, but just a productive time within yourself, to have that self-awareness so you can be your best self for others is important. So spending time outside, that's my favorite, in the sun, even though it's disgusting and snowy and cold outside. Sometimes just going for a quick walk if you feel that that's necessary, doing a little like just stretch in your house, but changing up your scenery can be huge. This also goes with reaching out to loved ones as well. Loved ones, your friends, your family, they know you best. A lot of the time they're not scared to check you and tell you that, you know, how you're portraying yourself, how you're coming off, and also just to touch base with someone who cares about you without having, you know, burdening them with the situation that you're within. Having that conversation can be huge, and odds are they might be in a situation that they could use to talk about it as well. So it allows you to have that emotional intelligence to interact and to discuss this with them. So then also seeking understanding instead of correctness in your daily conversations. This one to me is the most important, because a lot of the time when we're in either like debates in class, or, you know, we're in such a polarized time in this moment, and we're seeing this because there's such a lack of conversation occurring. So people are coming in thinking that they're correct. There's no, you know, wiggle room with that, and they're going to show everybody else that they're correct. And there's no conversation happening. It's really just a big battle. And so to come in with the intention of understanding and not correctness is pretty critical here. There's a saying where you can either be happy or you can be right. And odds are most things are opinion based. And so you're not going to be right. So walking in with the intention of understanding someone's perspective, so you can either be a better community member, a better leader, or you can learn something new about a situation. They don't have to be correct, and neither do you. And you can walk away with the comfort of knowing who you are, but then also who and what that other person is and what their intentions are in that space. Sorry, just reading the comments. But yeah, are there any questions moving forward with this? Perfect. We're going to do our discussion questions. And Michael, I'm sorry, I'm not able to like read and turn my brain into other comments when I'm doing stuff. But maybe you can bring this into the discussion questions that we're having. So the first one is, in what way can self-awareness enhance emotional intelligence, or vice versa? So how can emotional intelligence enhance self-awareness and otherwise? Or in what space do you think that would be most critical? And you can just shout out.
You're muted, James.
Thanks. Sorry, I was reading the question again. What ways can self-awareness? I mean, a lot of times we can tell ourselves that we're happy just because like we're portraying, you know, our persona on display. And so you can trick yourself by mistake into ignoring how you're really feeling or what's really going on. So yeah, I definitely think that sometimes it's good to just check in. I was just thinking, you know, oh, I really should start journaling. Just something to like calm that stream of consciousness that we get, and kind of like organize our thoughts. So yeah, I think self-awareness, like just checking in with yourself once in a while, you can find out, oh, maybe I'm uncomfortable right now. Maybe I'm worried about something and I'm just not letting myself process that. So yeah, I think they're definitely connected.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And so what do you think for the second one, where how can increased self-awareness and emotional intelligence strengthen your interpersonal relationships? So it's kind of what you were saying already of having that like self-awareness with yourself, but how can that interact with other relationships we may have?
I think a key value in most relationships is honesty. I know with my mother, like on a more personal like example, I don't always tell her how I'm like doing because I feel like she has enough stress on her own. But when we just checked in this weekend, and I was like, I opened up to her a little bit about how I feel about some things, and she was like, oh, I wish you were more honest with me from the beginning, because we would have just like dealt with this a lot sooner. And as soon as we like talked about it, it definitely was like a weight off of my shoulders. I've been sleeping better. It's been like, I can't, like, it's sounds so like cheesy to say, but I felt like an instant weight off my shoulders as soon as we talked. And I think that it makes us more on the even playing field. A lot of times I feel like I need to like protect her from things, but it's like, no, like she's her own person. We can deal with things. So I think, yeah, the more honest you are, um, it just makes everything easier.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really great example that a lot of us have with, I think, especially our parents, that kind of like, are you a younger child, if you don't mind me asking?
No, actually, I'm the oldest.
Okay, because there's a dynamic that I've been reading because I'm the youngest child and I have that same fear with my mom. And it's a more like, oh, I can handle it on my own and I don't need someone to come in and assist, or, I don't want to worry anybody. Like, I just don't want to, so it's a very either older or younger child
Well, you never want
dynamic.
them to know that something's going on, because then you don't want them to like blame themselves and think like, oh, am I the problem? Like, no, there's no
Exactly.
problem. It's just this is what's the issue at hand.
Absolutely. And I think having that conversation, it allows them to check base with you because at the end of the day, they're, people genuinely care. And this is also a part of their own version of emotional intelligence to understand where you are at that moment. And then to talk about it, it's like, oh, that wasn't a big deal. I just had that with my mom as well about both my sister and I are moving out, and I had anxiety about it because I thought she had anxiety about it, but she's like fine.
Oh,
And
congratulations.
oh, I'm not doing it for a while.
Oh,
I'm a planner. I like a roadmap, so my brain's
that's
already
good.
in like 2025. But
Oh,
there's like a conversation that can occur so that everybody's awareness can be understood, especially when there's an interpersonal relationship that affects one another. So that's a really great example, and I also think is very applicable to other conversations and relationships, that it's not necessarily worrying somebody. They're probably worried, and it's better for you just to come and communicate what you're feeling.
right.
And so for number 3, I mean, you basically just nailed it, that, describe a time where either you or a leader exemplified the practices we discussed today. So you did in that conversation.
Okay, cool.
I I also think it's important to hold accountable when like leaders don't necessarily exemplify those practices, and how we learned from that experience to become better leaders ourselves, or just to become better in interpersonal relationships within ourselves as well. So is there like a different way, and you don't have to be specific, we're not here to like spill tea on people, but like, or how what something that you learned from maybe like a job or a conversation you had that where someone was exemplifying or maybe wasn't?
I mean, I've always worked in food industry, and it's always, it's a very big teamwork effort. Whether it's Starbucks or a pizza place or whatever. And if you don't have that constant communication, like you're just gonna get pissed at someone else, or you're gonna be letting them down, but like not, or like worried about it. Like, I just think that we always need to check in and remember, like, oh, not everyone can read your thoughts, and you can't read everyone else's thoughts. And it's easy to assume, oh, well, I obviously meant it like this. And it's like, well, it's not always obvious. So I know it's a very broad, but yeah, I think it's important sometimes to remember, oh, maybe they didn't see it the way I was trying to portray it. Maybe I need to repeat myself.
Yeah, definitely. And that can kind of go into walking into conversation with understanding rather than correctness as well. It blew my mind when I realized like my friends and family can't read my mind, and they don't know what I mean and how I feel all the time. And I actually like, whoa, I have to like verbalize that and like let them know what a concept. But it's like you know, having that kind of communication is huge. And then also, I don't know, just learning from others as well as they express and excel, you can kind of see how dynamics form. And yeah, my dad, the team dynamic is huge. My father was a chef as well, so in food industry, that's huge.
Yeah.
Because if one person at the end, if a line cook doesn't have like something done a certain way, everybody else's schedule's thrown off for that one
Right.
dish or slip that's there. So like that's why you hear all
What was the quote earlier? It was, you can either be happy or you can be correct.
yeah.
I like that. I do like that because I often like to be correct. But sometimes it is just easier to not have that battle and just, move on. And I've definitely realized that within myself in different situations.
Yeah, and knowing that your self-preservation and your values can still remain where they are, even if the conversation didn't flow or they don't see the perspective you have. That doesn't mean you have to change who you are or what you're feeling or what you're saying. It's just like you saw a boundary, you understand the boundary, and you can still, it doesn't mean that you're in the wrong if you're not being understood in that way. It just means that there's a boundary there with the other person or with the group, and that's not, I hate to say it's like, oh, it's not your problem, but that's not on you to carry. And so you can just carry who you are. As long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody else, carry who you are moving forward and have that confidence. So that's the self-awareness part of emotional intelligence.
Cool.
Bam.
Preguntas?
You guys have been very thorough. I don't have any questions in mind. I think it's been really cool.
Thank you, James.
Guys are both very good, presentation givers, leaders. Yeah, it's neat. Sometimes, Natalie tried to coerce me to get into this event, and I was like, oh, I might have to do like critical thinking. I texted her that. I might have to do like critical thinking. It's like, no, some of these things are just things we already know, but it's good to just like check in and talk about it once in a while. So yeah, it's cool.
Well, I'm so glad. You should join ILA. Just saying. I'm gonna help Michael with this plug. You should join ILA in your final semester. We have some really cool people, and it's not always critical thinking. It's a lot of fun.
I'll be taking last class next